Welcome to another edition of the Meet the Visionaries podcast, sponsored by the MIT Center for Real Estate. My name is Monisha Nasa, and I'm a student in the Master of Science in Real Estate Development program here at MIT. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Susan Uthayakumar, Chief Energy and Sustainability Officer and Executive Committee member at Prologis. Susan leads the company's energy solutions business, where she oversees the development of solutions that help customers achieve energy independence. As a member of the company's executive management team, Susan ensures alignment with Prologis's broader business objectives and growth strategy. Susan, thank you so much for joining us. Could you start by telling us a bit about yourself? What led you to your current role at Prologis?
First of all, thank you for having me here. I work a lot with MIT, and I'm always very inspired to be here. So what led me to Prologis? Well, prior to Prologis, I spent 17 years with Schneider Electric, which is an electrical distribution energy management company. So I've been in the space of energy for a very long time and always in a P&L role, right, where you're managing results. You're worrying about the quarter results. That company was very focused on doing things with less, so always focused on sustainability. And just prior to COVID, I was the CEO for Schneider Electric Canada. And, we all had many thoughts as we were coming out of COVID, right? It did really reframe how we thought about life, what we wanted to do. And just after that, I was in a remote part of Canada called the Fogo Island. And that community was built on cod, the fishing of cod. And they went through a really difficult period when the cod population was decimated because of overfishing. And therefore, there's a lot of thought about a sustainable ecosystem in this community. And there I came across a statue, it's called The Lost Bird, by an artist who put a statue of birds where it was last seen. I believe there's 7 of them. So I came across the statue of an auk. An auk is a 2-meter flightless bird. And looking at that statue and thinking that it's lost forever because of human actions, human decisions, really made me rethink what I wanted to do. That day I got a call from Prologis. And this is a company that not many people know of, but it is the world's largest logistics real estate company. So 1.3 billion square feet in 20 countries. And having come from an energy background, wanting to create a sustainable world, knowing that energy is important, and knowing that real estate and energy is intersecting more and more, is what brought me to Prologis, to create a renewable energy company and to build buildings sustainably. It's a long answer, but that's really what got me to the company.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a beautiful story. For listeners who may not be familiar with it, can you introduce how Prologis approaches sustainability within the real estate and logistics sectors?
Absolutely. So first, I have to give you more context to Prologis, right? I mentioned we're 1.3 billion square feet in 20 countries. And what we do is we develop and manage logistics real estate. So our customers are all of your Fortune 100 and 500, and small mom and pop companies. In fact, probably most companies will occupy our space. And to give you the magnitude of what goes through our warehouses, 2.8% of the world GDP goes through our warehouses. So if you're in the US, probably 33% of what you're wearing would have come from our warehouses. So it's an incredible scale. And obviously in this space, we touch both buildings and transportation. So decarbonizing them is not necessarily easy, but it's important because of the goal to manage emissions globally. So the way we think about it is, number one, we build buildings better, more energy efficient, and less carbon and high performance as we can. So what does that mean? It means that all of our new development is 100% sustainable certified. We build our buildings to be energy ready, meaning that we can deploy solar energy on our roofs, meaning that they will be ready for fleet electrification. And we do life cycle studies so we understand where the emissions are coming from. And we really pay attention to how we design the building. The more material that you can take out without compromising the performance of the building, the less emissions you have. So we really think about it. And then we also approach things from a data standpoint, right? Having information on what's contributing the emissions is really important for us to understand how to mitigate them.
Mm-hmm. Can you demystify a little bit the scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions? I know you categorize emissions in those buckets.
Absolutely. So scope 1 emissions are the emissions that are in your control. So the emissions that you will have from the offices that you own or you lease. Scope 2 emissions are the emissions that come from the electricity that powers those buildings that are in your control. So those two you can say are your operations because you literally control everything that contributes to that emission picture. Scope 3, which is the hardest to abate, are things that are not in your control, but that are in your value chain. So for me, scope 3 is the energy consumption of our customers in our premises. So I don't really control what they do, but it's in our premises. So if you look at Prologis, I remember I mentioned that we're very data driven. So the biggest emission for us is scope 3, 99.8%, which is the hardest to abate, right?
Yeah.
So I knew that as I kind of took on this role, I had to be very thoughtful and creative in how I solve for this, because somehow I have to get my value chain to come along the journey with me. So the way I went about it is, number one, Hamid Moghadam, who is the founder and CEO of Prologis, he said to me, we will lead in this space. You know what? We need to be ambitious in the goals that we have, because with our scale, there's a responsibility to solve for that. So I set a pretty ambitious net zero goal, and our net zero goal is to be in our operations to be net zero by 2030. So that's 90% reduction in scope 1 and 2 and 27.5% reduction in our scope 3. And then by 2040 to be net zero in our operation and in our value chain. So 90% reduction everywhere. That meant that we had to introduce new ways of building buildings. We call it our net zero standard. Like I spoke before, it is having energy ready electrical distribution equipment, having the roofs ready to host solar, and a number of different attributes that all our buildings that we will build will adhere to. And number two, it is to set up businesses, because all of this requires tremendous amount of capital, and no one will give you capital if there's no return for it. You also have a fiduciary duty. So we set up an energy company within Prologis that I run globally. We set up a fleet electrification business that I run globally, and both are focused on decarbonizing either the energy consumption in the building or the transportation that comes into our facilities.
Pivoting to the day-to-day of your role, how does your team work to scale sustainability solutions?
A great question. So I want to give you a little bit of context to how Prologis operates, because it's really an example of business innovation from where I stand. One, we build logistics real estate, as I mentioned before. So we have been very strategic to have land, to acquire land where it's close to urban dense population. And with the proliferation of e-commerce, that's where you really need to have logistics facilities. So people before me and the founder has made an amazing decision to set up the business that way. But that also means that you're close to grid congestion and where you need energy the most, right? So you've got these two elements playing together. And how do we then think about it? In order for us to build at the scale that we do, we build about 40 million square feet. You also require capital, and that is brought in terms of strategic capital. So investors who want to invest in sustainable buildings, in logistics buildings. And so when I look at the intersection of sustainability, energy, and real estate, I really have to consider the different stakeholders that I need to provide answers to be accountable for. So on one, the financial fiduciary responsibility to our shareholders, which is what led to the inception of the businesses so they can fund the capital that's required with a return that's accepted. We always say, at Prologis, we do things that make common sense and business sense, and we have economics in mind. Number two, as you're building buildings, as you're working with the people that are deploying these buildings and constructing these buildings, you have to have innovation in mind. You have to design them differently. You have to know new technologies. You have to know. You have to work with your suppliers. So we work with cement producers. We work with steel manufacturers. Examples of that would be Holcim, for example. They have lower carbon cement that comes in slab. In fact, we were experimenting them in your climate consortium at MIT, because you have to make sure as you switch materials that the performance standards holds. So we really leverage the know-how of experts like MIT, like Stanford, to test these solutions. So it's the tie to the community, tie to the suppliers, and tie to academia who could vet and bring thought leadership to us. Number three, I really have to think about how I intersect with my investors, right? So investors so you are deploying this capital to do these businesses. So tell me, give me data points, give me proof points that you're reducing emissions. So knowing the consumption of electricity, of water in your buildings, and being able to share that is important. So therefore, digitizing information and making sure we're leveraging technology, AI, is very important. So really, on my day-to-day, your question was, well, how does your day-to-day look like? Honestly, I never know what I'm going to solve for that day. There's a lot of thought that goes into how should we think about all of these things? What is the most efficient way of doing it? And how do you then articulate what you're doing so investors, employees, stakeholders understand? And how do you lead the industry? So I find my job to be very interesting, I would say. Sometimes tough, but interesting for sure.
That sounds very exciting. Going back to, you mentioned Scope 3 emissions are not in your control. The current explosive expansion of the AI data center industry is being challenged by energy bottlenecks, aging grids, regulatory hurdles, transmission and distribution constraints. How does Prologis leverage its growing network of solar and energy storage capacity, as well as microgrid developments, to ensure energy reliability for tenants?
I am a firm believer in progress, right? And the reality is that AI, automation, electrification, all of these things, and specifically driven by AI, is going to increase the consumption of energy. And we know that the supply of energy cannot match the demand that we have. So we think about it in two ways. One, how do we best leverage the capacity that exists on the grid? Because when you're building AI data centers, you're looking at 150 plus megawatts. In one geography, in one site, that's a lot of power. So that is a challenge for utilities. But if you speak to utility CEOs, and we do, you will find that there is excess capacity in the grid. It's more the peak time or a location-specific challenge that they're dealing with in AI data centers. So we're actually working with PRE, which is an industry consortium that works with all of the utilities to identify where is there excess capacity on the grid. Can you deploy modular data centers that would relieve some of the pressure? So when I'm talking about modular data centers, I'm talking about 5 to 20 megawatt solutions. And there is the ability to network these so that they almost function as a 50 to 100 megawatt solution. So remember I mentioned innovation. This is part of the innovation. So we're actively working on that with PRE as the organization, utilities, and I would say some of the world's largest companies today. I'm not sure that I can name them, and you will find out soon, but we're working on that. Number two, we have the capability to generate on-site power. We have built what I would say is the largest charging infrastructure in North America in Denver. It is a 10 megawatt microgrid. It's 6 microgrids in total, accounting for 10 megawatts, that can charge up to 98 large trucks simultaneously, or 300 in a day. the technology that's used there is the same in terms of, so it's being powered by linear generators, which is a Mainspring, which is a startup out of Stanford. And so that technology can be used for microgrids. Will it address all of the power needs of data centers? No, but the combination of that plus solar power plus the grid power can produce the energy that is needed for the data centers that we're developing. We also think of microgrids. Whenever you have data centers, you have to have resiliency, right? And to the extent that we can relieve any load from the grid, we always think of doing microgrids, and we think about innovative ways of generating that power. So linear generators, solar, natural gas, where it needs to be, because I can't really get away from that when you think about large loads, and also fuel cells. How do I see the future going? The renaissance of nuclear. Really, nuclear is a proven technology. And you've got nuclear facilities being recommissioned, and you've got modular nuclear centers that are being evaluated, and some that are really thinking about how will we fast track. So I think it's the intersection of all of these. And we can even think about there's other sources, biogas is another option. So I think we don't have all of the answers today. I would tell you that Prologis thinks of it in terms of we can't stand in the way of progress. We have to find ways of relieving the pressure on the grid. So we're partners to utilities. How can we be innovative in developing on-site generation and management of power? So we think about it in all of these terms, and we are very, very open to working with the ecosystem, because we know that us alone cannot solve the issue or the problem. So we're really open to working collaboratively to find the solution.
Following up on that, are there any companies that are scaling energy technologies that you admire?
Wow. So I really am interested and curious and have high expectation for modular nuclear, right? Companies that come to mind, X Energy is one. Oklo is another one that I am super interested in. Terawatt comes to mind. Bloom, when you think about fuel cell generation. Mainspring, when you think about linear generators. And I always think of, those are the ones that I know, that I've gotten to know. But I always think, what is that? What is there that I don't know, right? And I think about, how can we push forward innovation? How can we accelerate innovation? Because I think, as I said, I'm a firm believer in progress. So progress means that we need innovation to solve the problems that progress creates.
Prologis Ventures has been strategically investing in climate technologies, automation, and analytics.
Yeah.
How does your team integrate these tools to improve energy efficiency and resilience in your portfolio?
Okay. So the way we're set up is, so I have two jobs at Prologis. I am the Chief Sustainability Officer responsible for decarbonizing our existing footprint and thinking about how we build the new footprint. And then the second job that I have is being responsible for the business of energy and fleet electrification and on-prem power, I will say, so microgrids. Mm-hmm. There is also the ventures arm of Prologis. That group looks to technologies that we should be investing in. So, and then I have another group that is accountable for the global impact and sustainability reporting and management of Prologis. So the three arms, we work very closely together to solve the problem. So ventures will find new technology that they will sometimes invest in, sometimes not. Sometimes they'll bring it to my attention, and I will then use and pilot those technologies. So a great example would be solar cycle, right? So when you deploy solar on our facilities, you think about, well, what would you do at the end of life? Our ventures team invested and found a company that focuses on recycling solar panels. So we do try to think end to end, and we do really think about how can we enable these startups or new technologies that are coming into play. And we also think about, remember what I said about what don't we know? What doesn't Prologis know, right? So we really put a lot of effort into finding things that we don't know so we can use that solution to think better about what it is that we do.
When it comes to AI, what tools and applications are you prioritizing in your value chain?
Number one, AI for us is a way of working. And this may sound silly, but think about all of the things that we used to do, right? Report writing, earnings, questions, and all of that. And it required a lot of people's time than manual time to do it. So we first and foremost deploy AI wherever we can. So we automate as much as we can. So specific to the area that I'm in, if you think about the data that I mentioned, emissions data, right? We used to have to go get reports, bills, invoices, whatever we can get our hands on, and then to enter that information manually. We don't do that anymore. We automate as much as possible. And once we automate, we run AI to say, where is the inefficiency in how we are doing certain things, and what can we remove? We use AI to flag things. What are the patterns that are changing and why? And then where would I like to go? So we are obviously building a lot of energy assets in our facilities. And we just surpassed 1 gigawatt of energy generation supported by storage in our facilities. That load, today is being used as the buildings are needed. There will come a day when that load will need to be managed better because you can, right? And when you think about that type of load management, there's nothing better than to deploy AI and to leverage AI to do so. So we're building the building blocks. We're using AI where we can today. But as I see the future, as I look to the future, I see a greater need and a greater benefit of what we can have.
Looking ahead, what gives you hope? Where do you see the greatest potential for impactful change in real estate, energy, and logistics infrastructure?
Yeah, I started this job at Prologis 4 years ago. And we were thinking about how do we marry the core of what we do, real estate, to sustainability and to energy generation, right? They were all different pillars at that time. I knew where the future was going in terms of the scarcity of electrons, the importance of energy efficiency, the importance of emissions reduction. But I don't think I could have predicted the acceleration of it, And you may say, well, Susan, that sounds surprising given some of the macro environments. Not really, because when you think about it, AI has really put the focus on energy. It used to be, our founder will say, it used to be about location. Now it's about location and energy. Mm-hmm. It really is. And when you think about how you generate that energy, you have a tremendous opportunity to drive sustainability. So what gives me hope? I always think that when you put minds together, when you put people together, you can solve a problem. And I think solving that problem is not by saying people can't have progress. That doesn't work. So we should not be afraid of where we need to go, knowing that we have the ability, capability to solve that problem. And a great example of it for me is, think about COVID, right? We didn't know what it was. We didn't know how to what the solution or what the cure could be the right word. But I think it took us 2 years to come up with a vaccine. You know what? So I think that when there is intention, there's a purposeful resolve to find a solution, you can. I just think people have to care. And that's what gives me hope.
Absolutely love that perspective. On that note, what advice would you give to students, researchers, and industry leaders in the field? Any calls to action?
I would really encourage students to take risk, to not think of things as not possible. And I would encourage them, when something seems insurmountable, to break it down into pieces. You just kind of have to solve the next step. And I find that when you do that, you can get to the ultimate goal of what you want to do. I would really encourage students to care. It's when you care and when you love what you do, that's when you can really exceed expectations that you have of yourself. And that's when life is interesting, because you're solving a problem that's important and meaningful to you. In terms of researchers and everyone else, I think we've got to forward innovation. I think we've got to think out of the box. I think we should not be afraid to experiment. And I think we should not be afraid to fail, because I think you have the greatest learning in failure, and failure always leads to success from where I stand.
That's a beautiful lesson. Susan, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me here.
Thanks to our listeners for tuning into another edition of Meet the Visionaries podcast. And please remember to stay tuned for future episodes by subscribing to our podcast, or follow us on social media by visiting cre.mit.edu to learn more. Until next time, take care, listeners.